Mic check. Dyer, do a mic check.
Mic check, mic check, mic check. Checking all the mics. Where is Mike? We're checking for Mike.
Is that the volume you're going to be speaking at? You're a little loud. Alright, mic check 1, 2. Dyer, do a mic check.
For Mike.
Is that the volume you're going to be speaking
Mic check,
at?
mic check. I was a little loud, I think. And I was also sitting back.
Alright, mic check 1, 2. Dyer, do a mic check.
For Mike.
Is that the volume you're going to be speaking
Mic check,
at?
mic check. I was a little loud, I think. And I was also...
Alright, I think we're good.
There's silence in the darkness, a chaos underneath, a reckoning inside us calls out from the deep. There's blood in the water, rumors in the thunder. Together we stand, or divided we fall. Brothers and sisters we are. We got heroes, blood in our veins. We got a fire, it's not gonna fade. 'Cause we were born for this. We were born for this. We're gonna rise up out of the grave. Not gonna back down, not gonna break. 'Cause we were born for this. We were born for this.
Yeah, sharing audio.
There's phantoms in the mirror,
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap from behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. I haven't said that in a really long time.
It has been a few.
Alongside me is my co-host, and sometimes just the host, Fox Travis.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I mean, still drugged up and immobile, but doing all right.
And out of context, that sounds really bad.
Oh, fair enough. Should I explain? It's not really anything.
I mean, if you want, I don't care.
I had an injury. I got surgery, and I'm currently getting better and taking medicine for that.
Dyer shattered his foot in service of you, his country.
It was nothing heroic. It was definitely stupid. It definitely happened.
On a scale of John Kerry paper clipping his finger to get a Purple Heart, where does your injury land at?
So is that like a 1, and then like actually dying for your country is a 10?
Yes.
It's a 1.1. Oh, anyways, thank you all who make this show possible by donating to us financially or just liking, sharing, subscribing. Really appreciate it. You guys are responsible for the train wreck that's about to happen. I hope you guys have come to terms with that. So thank you very much to Kaylet, Ori May, Nathan, Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thunder Erican, the White Lion, Timberwolf,
and the White Wolf.
And the White Wolf, and all of you guys, especially those who are commenting in our chat and being engaged. We appreciate that. So we got a long 17 pages of notes, so you guys are fucked. Let's get started.
Alrighty, so our first story for tonight is the vaccine mandate is dead. It's a pretty big one for our first one for the night. This week, the Supreme Court upheld, wait for it, the Constitution, which is a pretty massive surprise to everyone involved.
It's unfortunate this is something that we get excited about because, it's so rare that this kind of thing happens. But specifically, they ruled that the Department of
Nazi
Occupational
How dare you?
Health...
Why would you do that?
Need to see a video of Fox giving Dyer that sloppy and wet head where Dyer's toes are curling and he's speaking in tongues. Please, I need it so bad. Please, bro, please, the fans are begging for it so bad. Rar
Well, that was $10 well spent.
Let me guess, that was Slowpoke.
I have no idea who that was. Thank you for the $10. We will spend it well. Much appreciated.
Yes. Okay. Specifically, they ruled that the Department of
Dyer's just
Occupational
gonna
Health
keep right on going.
and Safety does. We have so many notes to get through. That OSHA does not have the infinite legislative power to, as previously thought by people who really wanted it to be true. This is a split 6-3 decision, and it ends the employer vaccine mandate issued by the Biden administration late last year. By the way, a mandate that he had previously said he knew was illegal and would not pass scrutiny, but he did it anyways. This mandate would have required companies with more than 100 employees to require vaccines or fire their employees, or it would require them to get tested on a extremely ridiculous recurrence that would have made it prohibitively expensive. This decision would have affected 85 million American workers, and it was just the first step. They alluded that they planned on expanding it if they could get the restriction of companies with 100 employees or more to do it. They were going to make it be required to smaller companies as well, but this was like the first attempt.
Yep. And it was in the published decision, the court states its reasoning for striking down the mandate as follows. The Supreme Court writes, quote, although COVID-19 is a risk that occurs in many workplaces, it is not an occupational hazard in most. COVID-19 can and does spread at home, in schools, during sporting events, and everywhere else people gather. This kind of universal risk is no different from any other day-to-day danger that is faced, from crime to air pollution or to a number of communicable diseases. Permitting OSHA to regulate the hazards of daily life simply because most Americans have a job and face some of those same risks while on the clock would expand OSHA's regulatory authority without clear congressional authorization.
What I don't like about that decision, though I do like that decision, is that it still leaves the door open that a law could be passed that could remove someone's ability to have a job because they refuse to follow a government mandate that was done by other means. Yes. But yes, it makes perfect sense. OSHA, unelected bureaucrats who are supposed to regulate job safety, should not have the right to take away your job because of the possibility of getting infected by disease. The order further states, although Congress has indisputably given OSHA the power to regulate occupational dangers, it has not given that agency the power to regulate public health more broadly, requiring the vaccination of 84 million Americans selected simply because they work for employers with more than 100 employees certainly falls in the latter category. It also is a crazy disparate enforcement. If it's really that important, why would it only apply to larger companies if it was so important so people wouldn't die? Right? It's why are some people exempt and others? I shouldn't apply to anyone, but you definitely have some people being treated differently.
Yes. Let's see here. Also stated by the court in their concurring or agreeing opinion was, quote, the question before us is not how to respond to the pandemic, but who holds the power to do so. The answer is clear. Under the law as it stands today, the power rests with the states and Congress, not with OSHA. So the Supreme Court, in their opinion section, they said that basically somebody has the power to respond to the pandemic, but it's definitely not OSHA.
All other powers go back to the states. This is a direct rebuke of diversity hire Sotomayor, who during an oral argument for this case demonstrated the quality of her Yale law degree by saying, quote, I'm not sure I understand the distinctions why the states would have the power to institute a mandate such as OSHA, but the federal government wouldn't. You don't understand?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, what do you mean you don't understand? The Constitution outlines or enumerates several very specific and very bounded powers of the federal government. It's estimated the Constitution has anywhere from 30 to 35 of them, depending on how you're counting. And it also specifically states that any of the unenumerated powers belong to the states. So if the federal government has about 30 powers and the states have infinity minus 30 powers, well, I would guess that the states, that's a pretty good explanation as to why the states would have the power to do something, but the federal government doesn't have the power to do something. All of a sudden, it makes sense if you understand basic constitutionality, which apparently they don't teach at Yale, which is actually completely unsurprising. Let's see.
I can't believe that she said that she didn't understand something that is clearly specifically written in the Constitution. Her saying that she doesn't understand, that means she doesn't understand her job, because her job is to make sure that laws meet the letter of the law of the Constitution. So what does she think she's doing when she goes to work every day?
I have absolutely no idea what she thinks she's doing. I mean, that statement is absolutely disqualifying for her position as a Supreme Court justice. And really, I think future candidates should be asked to explain, why do the states have more power than the federal government? And if they can't explain that, they cannot be approved as an appointment to the Supreme Court, because that is like, I don't know that there is anything more basic than the stratification of powers between the states and the federal government. I mean, that is at the core of the Constitution. The entire point of the Constitution was to make sure that there was a distinction between those powers, and that the federal government was supposed to be weak.
And that they were limited.
Yes.
Yeah.
So her not understanding that is completely disqualifying. Like, she should just be, I don't know that there is I think it's been discussed before, I don't think that there is a process for impeaching a Supreme Court justice, but by God, that we need to come up with one, because
I actually think, I'll look into it. It's basically this simple. The Constitution says that the federal government has the powers of A, B, and C split across the different parts of the government, and everything else that's not A, B, and C goes to the states. So if it's not listed, and this isn't, obviously vaccine mandates are not listed in the Constitution, they weren't that forward thinking, it goes to the states.
Yale should be proud of her.
Yeah, they probably are, and that's the problem with Yale. So, further showing off their academic pedigree, the Clinton-appointed Justice, is it Breyer?
Yeah.
At one point argued for the necessity of a vaccine mandate by citing the 750 million Americans per day that were being affected by COVID. That's right. Every day, all 350 million Americans catch COVID 2 or 3 times. Every day. It's hospitals are very busy, or we just don't notice it, I guess. In fact, we're if they're listening to us on the East Coast right now, chances are you just caught COVID for the second time today. In fact, you've probably caught COVID 10 to 15 times since Breyer said this 5 days ago.
That's incredible.
You know what? He might be, his math might be a little off.
Another amazing statistic came from, again, Justice Sotomayor, where she cited the 100,000 children on ventilators as a justification for the vax mandate for employers. Now, I think these kids need to get back to the coal mines as much as the next child labor advocate, but the libtards shut that down over a century ago, so I'm not really sure what children have to do with workplace safety regulations. Also, it's important to note that Sotomayor's 100,000 figure was a little bit off. It was estimated that only 3,500 kids were in the hospital at the time that she said that, and it's not clear that any of them are on ventilators or that they are in the hospital specifically and exclusively due to COVID. Most of them are there for other issues like leukemia or just because they're fat. Who knows? But they're there for a myriad of other comorbidities. But even using the most liberal estimate, Sotomayor inflated the number by about 2,850% to make her point. That's science.
Yeah, so I believe the number for how many kids since the beginning until now that have required ventilators was in like the 1,000 somethings.
I think it was in the hundreds.
Is that how many were total like using them right now?
The 3,500 is how many kids are in the hospital right now. Within that number, some percentage may be on ventilators, but there is no data for that right now. All the fact checkers, the most that they could find was that there was currently 3,500 kids in the hospital. They were unable to distinguish whether or not they were there for comorbidities, whether or not they were there for completely unrelated reasons. They were not able to identify how many of them were on ventilators. So we know that there's 3,500 kids that were, maybe they went to go get a checkup that day, but they were in the hospital at the point in time where Sotomayor said that. It's not clear how serious their condition was.
We used recently had the Biden administration come out and say that what percentage of people who died from COVID had a 4 on average comorbidities?
It was 75% of the
Yeah.
COVID deaths.
So
had,
3 out of 4.
yeah.
4. So the vast majority of people who are dying from COVID are dying because they have those mitigating or not those additional factors that make COVID more deadly, like being morbidly obese, which apparently is fat phobic to say. However, you're still dying regardless. So,
And it's also important to remember that those death stats are from Alpha and Delta COVID. The Omicron numbers are starting to come out now because Omicron's only been running around since November, even though it somehow spawned into existence 18 months before that, which is another story. But the Omicron numbers are starting to get some good data on them, and it looks like out of the it was something like 50,000 people had been in the hospital in the last month due to Omicron, and none of them needed ventilators, and there's still only been one death attributed to Omicron in the United States. And so it would appear that even if there was 100,000 kids on ventilators for COVID Delta, which was not true, it would appear that Delta is gone now. The current estimate is that of people getting infected with COVID now, like 98% of them are getting infected with Omicron, and the Delta infection rate is down to like 1.5%. So like every day, the people that are getting infected by COVID, only 1.5% of them are getting Delta. Everybody's getting Omicron. That's the dominant strain now. And the dominant strain does not have even the made up death statistics of Delta. So we are attempting, the federal government, the Biden administration is attempting to apply safety regulations and these emergency powers related to the death statistics for a virus which is not currently circulated in the United States.
I'll bet you that one guy who did die probably was morbidly obese, had the beaties, jumped from a bridge and got hit by a bus, and then got tested for Omicron when he got to the hospital.
I think he knew something about the Clintons.
Yes, he was a Clinton informant. Anyways, so one of the funniest bits of this was that buried in the ruling was a reference to the White House attempting to use OSHA as a legislative workaround. This is a direct reference to a tweet from Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff. Klain had retweeted MSNBC anchor Stephanie Ruhle. Stephanie Ruhle, who said, OSHA doing this vax mandate as an emergency workplace safety rule is the ultimate workaround for the federal government to require vaccinations.
Yeah, so you had the Biden administration saying, like, hey, we're going to use OSHA as a workaround so that the executive branch can suddenly become the legislative branch. And then the Supreme Court said, hey, didn't you guys say that you were trying to use this as a workaround? Well, you're not allowed to do that. So thanks for tweeting this out.
You said the quiet part out loud, you dumbass. We're trying to cheat the system. Hopefully they'll let it pass.
Exactly. I this might be one of the first times that a tweet has been used in reference. And it wasn't really a direct reference. It was just kind of an offhanded remark in the opinion segment. But I think that the Supreme Court needs to be using the Twitter accounts from the executive branch as evidence more often because, wow, that would certainly get a few of them into trouble. In response to the decision, so again, the Supreme Court knocked down the OSHA mandate. That was narrow in scope, so companies are still allowed to issue their own mandates within their company privately. There's nothing preventing them from doing that. And the states are still allowed to issue their own mandates if they would like to as well. So in response to the Supreme Court knocking down the OSHA regulation, Biden has already called on businesses to institute their own mandates independent of regulators. The Supreme Court does nothing to stop businesses from doing that, unfortunately.
There's also a Supreme Court ruling from like 30, 40 years ago where they ruled that it is unlawful for the federal government to encourage or to persuade private companies to do things that the government is not permitted to do. So they might actually be still in violation by
Are
publicly.
you saying, Dyer, that the federal government is not allowed to institute some kind of lucrative merger with corporations?
Yeah. So like an example is you can't have a
That's just
private.
fascist talk right now, Dyer.
I know, right?
You saying the federal government is not allowed to coordinate with capitalist businesses to oppress people. You not allowing that to happen is fascism, Dyer. How could you?
So like the police officers can't or shouldn't be allowed to violate your rights, according to the law. But the government can't then say, okay, we want a private security force to do the things we're not allowed to do. That would be a breach of the law as well, because the government is persuading a private company, to do something to violate someone's rights for the government, and that's against the law as well. So it's funny that
it's almost like you're not allowed to work around the restrictions the Constitution put in place.
Exactly.
Interesting. All right. Well, also it is important to also point out too that this case came before the Supreme Court largely due to the work of the Daily Wire. They were the headliner business that was at the front of the case that was brought to the Supreme Court. That case was merged with a case brought by the states, which was led by Ohio. So those two cases trying to strike down the vax mandate were merged into one case. And so we had mentioned several months ago when Daily Wire had initially launched their lawsuit that we had at least pointed out that if you were in support of that, you should consider throwing them some money by signing up for them. I did that, even though I've got some disagreements with many practices the Daily Wire has. This was certainly an important thing, and they have definitely won back some goodwill there, though we will remain critical of them when necessary. But as for right now, this is a pretty big win. 10 years ago, there was really no such thing as conservative alternative media outside of radio. And over the 2010s, throughout the Obama and the Trump administration, you had the likes of Daily Wire, Breitbart, Crowder, and several others, the Blaze Network. Those all kind of spawned into existence in the last 10 years, and they really have had a tangible impact now on our politics nationally. This was a big deal that the Daily Wire was able to kind of get this across the finish line and be the champion of this. So that's a great thing. Perhaps the next 10 years we can continue doing that and maybe get a hold of some of these institutions that we've lost to the left.
Yeah, good for Ted Cruz, by the way. As an
Good.
employee.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, Daily Wire employee, sometimes senator, full-time Daily Wire employee.
Also, I want to point out that the left-wing media's and all the politicians' first immediate response to this case was, and also the upcoming case regarding voting quote-unquote rights, was to say renew their calls for stacking the courts and also getting rid of the we call it a filibuster rule.
Ah, yes, the filibuster. It's something I will be talking about very soon here.
Yes.
All righty. Well,
Next story,
which I believe has the filibuster in it.
Story 2 is actually story B.
Is it? Wait, do we start with story 1? No, story 1 was story A, and then now we're on story B.
I thought we had 4 story Ds.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we can get any more Ds on the show after that super chat. All right, so our next story is on the Voting Act, or whatever the hell they're calling it these days. It is also dead. It was a very bad, no good, terrible week for the Biden administration. Nicknamed the Corrupt Politicians Act, the Democrats' latest attempt at subverting the election system has seemingly failed, which, of course, means that you are a racist.
This bill is currently being blocked by 50 Republican senators and 2 Democrat senators. Even with this majority opposition, Joe still wanted to attempt to break the filibuster in order to goose this bill over the finish line. In a speech to 4 historically black colleges this week, Joe, who once referred to black kids as roaches, said, quote, Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace? Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? Wow.
Now you can be forgiven if you aren't familiar with some of those names. For some context, George Wallace was a Democrat. Bull Connor was also a Democrat, and Jefferson Davis, guess what? Democrat. So Joe might be onto something here, because I definitely don't want to be on the side of the Democrats.
Yeah, those were guys who passed Jim Crow and were literal Klansmen. So he's trying to say anyone who supports voter ID and actually supports, states having the ability to pass their own election regulations.
It was just I don't know who wrote that, but clearly they don't know any history. I mean, you got Dr. King or George Wallace. So Dr. King, I guess if you want to associate him with civil rights, well, civil rights was largely opposed by Democrats.
Yep.
And George Wallace was a Democrat. So, it's looking pretty good. So you've got, do you want to be on the side of the people that were opposed by Democrats, or do you want to be on the side of the Democrats? Well, I guess we'll be on the side of that opposes the Democrats. Then you've got John Lewis or Bull Connor. Well, John Lewis was a famously corrupt Democrat versus a racist Democrat, so I don't know, that one's kind of out in the wash. And then you've got Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis. Well, Abraham Lincoln was famously Republican, opposing the Democrats, insurrecting the country, and then you've got Jefferson Davis, who was a Democrat. So I don't know what Joe was going on for. Did the Republicans sneak in and write Joe's speech for him? Because these are not the names I would have chosen if I was writing the speeches for Biden.
It's actually more terrifying that the Republicans didn't write a speech for him, because at least that that makes some sense. But our president, the president of the free world, leading our country, is really so stupid and illiterate of history that he thought this was a smart statement.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's funny because that entire quote, that could easily be read out by a Republican, and the context would have been perfectly fine. I think that any Republican could read that out. Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King, or do you want to be on the side of George Wallace? Well, that's a pretty easy one. Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Well, again, like I said, that one's kind of out in the wash. But, do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? 2 out of the 3 of those could easily appear in any Republican speech and be accurate.
And the problem is, he's what side he assumes he's on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, what side does he think he's on? Because I think Joe he jumped in the Senate, when was that? Late 70s?
He had best friends who were Klansmen.
Yeah, I mean, Joe was in the Senate something like 10 years after the civil rights was passed, and his mentors were the people opposing civil rights.
Yeah.
I would also like to point out again that Joe Biden called black kids roaches, which that was a new one to me. I mean, I feel like everybody who's been to public school probably has heard some interesting names for various demographic groups, but I've never heard that before until Joe said that he would call black kids roaches. Jesus. And he didn't even see a problem with that. He just said it. I was like, wait a second, is that even a slur? And then I found out that it was.
That is not far from the only thing he said about black people.
Oh, I know. Well. It's just my favorite one. It's my favorite one out of the things that he said.
That's nice. You have a favorite racist thing Biden said. I'm pretty sure he just dropped an N-bomb recently, but we'll move on.
Yeah, unfortunately I can't play that because my Stream Deck's broken. Little context. The show almost didn't happen today because my computer decided that today was a great day to upgrade to Windows 11 without asking me, and I was like, whoa.
Whoa, didn't even ask for consent?
It did not. And so it did disrupt a few of the connections to my peripherals, but we were able to get the show back on the rails here.
Yeah, so back on the rails anyways. Somehow, citing all the racists in his own party was not enough to convince Democrat Senator Kristen Sinema or to break the filibuster, and she responded to the request in a speech of her own on the Senate floor late this week.
I strongly support those efforts to contest these laws in court and to invest significant resources into these states to better organize and stop efforts to restrict access at the ballot box. And I strongly support and will continue to vote for legislative responses to address these state laws, including the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that the Senate is currently considering. I support these bills because they strengthen Americans' access to the ballot box, and they better ensure that Americans' votes are counted fairly. It is through elections that Americans make their voices heard, select their representatives, and guide the future of our countries and our community. These bills help treat the symptoms of the disease, but they do not fully address the disease itself. And while I continue to support these bills, I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country. The debate over the Senate's 60-vote threshold shines a light on our broader challenges. There's no need for me to restate my long-standing support for the 60-vote threshold to pass legislation. There's no need for me to restate its role protecting our country from wild reversals in federal policy. It is a view I've held during my years serving in both the U.S. House and the Senate, and it is the view I continue to hold. It is the belief that I have shared many times in public settings and in private settings. Senators of both parties have offered ideas, including some that would earn my support, to make this body more productive, more deliberative.
All right. Well, that kind of gets to what she was saying. Basically, she thinks that the 60-vote threshold for filibuster needs to stay because without it, it would just make the Supreme Court or the Senate a simple majority body, which
like
would
the House.
Exactly, which would just make the decisions flip-flop back and forth, which she's concerned about. Interestingly, I particularly enjoyed her honesty that the reason why she doesn't want to get rid of the filibuster is because there is still the disease of, I would assume she means Republicans in government. And until we can eliminate them fully, until we can eliminate the disease of Republicans, we cannot allow the possibility that they could then get a 50-vote threshold when they inevitably take back both chambers in the midterms. That was hilarious.
Yes. Now, it also bothers me that she said that she at least implied that the state laws that were referenced in the arguments for this bill, that they really are restricting voting rights. But if you actually read through them, the different states, the different voting bills that they're referring to aren't doing that at all. Like the examples they gave for like Florida and Texas, they are requiring voter ID or actually in some cases extending voting periods and setting voting times when there wasn't voting times specified before. And the laws in Texas and Florida are less restrictive, easier to vote than in places like New York and California.
Yeah. And then I just want to kind of re-clarify some of the procedure here. So what's going on right now with the filibuster? So the filibuster is essentially the rule that to close debate, you need 60 votes. So what happens in the Senate is that they'll want to vote on a bill, and so it requires 60 votes to bring that bill to vote. Otherwise, debate is still open. And so right now, the Democrats have their 48 regular Democrats plus Sinema. I think I misspoke earlier. So the Democrats have 49 in support of this bill. Manchin is still not in support of this bill. And he is joined by the 50 Republicans. So it's 51 to 49, which means that even if you could close debate and vote on it with 50 votes, they still don't have enough votes to actually get this over the line, even if there wasn't a filibuster. So Sinema kind of doesn't really see the point in getting rid of the filibuster at this moment. Also, her and a lot of other Democrats are looking forward to 10 months from now when the Republicans more than likely sweep both chambers. And then we're left without the filibuster, and the Republicans can start passing stuff with a simple 50-vote majority. which might be great for a little while, but not great for the Democrats. And so she is one of the only ones that is able to look out a little bit and plan ahead just a little bit. So that's kind of the lay of the land there, and that's what the procedure is, and that's what this whole discussion with the filibuster is. All right. Yeah, so following the fallout from this speech, we have the New York Times, who kind of best captured what the reaction was. Let's see here. So, all right. So they write, the New York Times writes, President Biden's campaign to push new voting rights protections through Congress appeared all but dead this Thursday after it became clear that he had failed to unite his own party behind his drive to overhaul Senate rules to enact legislation over Republican opposition. In an embarrassing setback for Mr. Biden, Senator Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat of Arizona, stunned her colleagues just hours before the president was slated to make his case to them in person at the Capitol by taking to the Senate floor to declare that she would not support undermining the filibuster to pass legislation under any circumstances. Harsh.
The New York Times continues, the announcement by Miss Sinema, who had long opposed changing Senate rules, left Mr. Biden, I like how they call him Mr. Biden, and Democrats without an avenue for winning enactment of the voting rights measure, which they have characterized as vital to preserve democracy in the face of Republican-led drive in states around the country to limit access at the ballot box. That's absolutely a lie right there. It came 2 days after the president had put his reputation on the line, not much left there, to make the case for enacting the legislation by any means necessary, including scrapping the famed filibuster. With a major speech, I wouldn't say so, with a speech in Atlanta that compared
editorialization there, New York Times,
compared opponents of the voting rights measure to racist figures of the Civil War era and segregationists who thwarted civil rights initiatives in the 1960s. What party were those segregationists?
I believe. Let me go back here. I think it was Democrat, and let me look this one up here. It's a Democrat. Oh, so that's crazy.
So let me rephrase that. He compared Republicans to Democrats.
I would also remind everybody that per Kamala Harris herself, we also know that Joe Biden was a segregationist because he opposed busing for little girls like her on the bus.
Yep. And it raised the question, this is back to the New York Times, right? And it raised the question of what Mr. Biden would do next, given that Republicans are all about certain to use the filibuster a fifth time to block the voting rights measure, and that Democrats lack the unanimous support needed in their party to change the rules to enact them to muscle the bills through themselves. Quote, like every other major civil rights bill that came along, if we miss the first time, we come back and try a second time, Mr. Biden said after emerging empty-handed from his session with Senate Democrats. We missed this time.
Oof.
Yeah, it's been a bad day, bad week, bad year for Biden. I can't think of anything that's gone right for him.
It's pretty bad.
For us. And it's as much as I think he is a complete idiot who should not be our president, him failing and continuing to fail, because I see no change in that trajectory, is really bad for us. But in this case, this failure, really good for us.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Well, our next story is about somebody else who's having a no good, very bad week, and that would be Fauci. Again. On Tuesday, the Republicans on the House Committee, the House Oversight Committee and Reform, the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. There we go. Wait, we have a House Committee on that?
Yeah.
What are they overseeing?
They're not doing a very good job, or at least they're just watching. They're like, they just observe but don't do anything, I guess, because there's lots and lots of corruption.
All right, well, I guess Direwolf exclusive breaking news. There is a House committee on oversight. I didn't know that. All right.
And reform.
Wow. All right, so let's try this again. So on Tuesday, Republicans on the House Committee on Oversight and Reform released a letter confirming, I believe, confirming and detailing the content of emails between Fauci and other government employees. The content of these emails has been leaked to the press previously through multiple channels, but this letter is the first time the committee has confirmed the actual content of those emails. They reveal that Dr. Fauci was warned of two things. One, the potential that COVID-19 leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and two, the possibility that the virus was intentionally genetically manipulated.
Despite Mr. Fauci claiming otherwise on multiple occasions, he was, in fact, aware of the monetary relationship between the NIAID and the U.S. National Institute of Health, the NIH. EcoHealth Alliance and also the Wuhan lab, Institute of Virology. By January 27th of 2020, Dr. Fauci also knew that the NIAID worked with EcoHealth to craft a grant policy to sidestep the gain-of-function moratorium at the time. The new policy designed by EcoHealth and agreed by the NIAID allowed EcoHealth to complete the dangerous experiments on novel bat coronaviruses with very little oversight that would have otherwise been blocked by the moratorium. They did a workaround to get around the law at the time, saying this research was too dangerous to be permitted. In January 2020, Dr. Fauci was also aware that EcoHealth was not in compliance with the terms of its grant that funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology. EcoHealth was required to submit an annual progress report to the NIAID by September 30th, 2019, and had not done it yet. So the committee subsequently learned that the EcoHealth failed to submit these reports, presumably to hide a gain-of-function experiment conducted on infectious and potentially lethal novel bat coronaviruses. So not only should they not have been given the grant in the first place, they did not provide the oversight reports of what they were doing so that they wouldn't be held accountable for doing the very same experiments they knew they were not allowed to be doing.
If only there was somebody that could oversee the overseers, then we would probably be good.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. In February of 2020, Dr. Fauci had a conference call with 11 scientists, in which he was warned that COVID-19 may have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and further, may have been intentionally genetically manipulated. Oh no. Just 3 days later, with no change in the evidence, Fauci signed off on a public letter definitively dismissing the lab leak theory. On April 17th, 2020, Dr. Fauci cited the Nature Medicine paper from the White House podium, likely in an effort to further stifle the hypothesis that COVID-19 was leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
So he helped draft the letter from the 4 scientists. He signed off on it, approved it, and then later used it as evidence.
It's kind of a little bit of a circle there. Basically, the first 2 months of the pandemic, Dr. Fauci spent emailing and calling everybody he knew saying, hey, was this us? It looks like it was us. And a bunch of people responding to him, yeah, it kind of looks like it was us. And then the 4 months after that, he spent trying to discredit anyone who said that, hey, maybe it was you guys. That was essentially the first 6 months of the pandemic for Fauci. Was 2 months of realizing, oh fuck, that was us, and 4 months of anybody who says that was us is a racist.
Yeah, and these emails are evidence that this conversation has happened, even though it likely happened far more than just on emails. But we do know that he knew this was true, and that he said something else. He said the opposite. In fact, I think he might have been the leading effort, person leading the effort to discredit anyone saying it could have come from the Wuhan lab.
It's not really people saying that it could have come from the Wuhan lab, Dyer. It's people trying to kill Fauci. That's what it is. If you think that the virus leaked from a lab, you're basically putting the knife in Fauci yourself.
Yeah. And you're also denying science because he is the science.
Yes, you're stabbing him in the stomach, then running outside and saying that it never happened.
Just murdered science right there.
Yes.
God damn.
How could you?
I'm disappointed, man. Disappointed.
My goodness.
So on Jan 12th, the day after the GOP released their letter, Project Veritas released a report of their own about a secret DARPA funding request for the Wuhan lab. Now, DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And their rejection of the March 2018 funding request by EcoHealth Alliance was them denying a grant for funding for the same research that was into COVID that was going on in many labs, including the Wuhan lab. Well, several labs, including the Wuhan lab.
I didn't really like the Veritas coverage on that. Maybe you could shed some light on this. What I saw from Veritas, I don't know how much of it you read. It was basically the only evidence that they had was a memo from a military personnel that worked at DARPA. It was basically a memo to themselves saying that this thing happened, but Veritas didn't have any of the original source documents. All they had was basically a sergeant emailing an email to himself, and then that email said that this happened, but they didn't have any primary source documents saying that it happened. I mean, I'm sure you've written a memo, Dyer. Does that necessarily mean that like is that like the primary source that happened? I know we should trust that you're not lying in an email, but is that?
I actually have a spot in the script to address that exactly, and I agree. This by itself is not at all damning. It is only one small grain in the heap. It is, in addition to other things we know.
Yeah.
This sheds more light. Basically, what happened was this guy who worked for DARPA, who understands the process and the forms involved, said he reviewed the request and other available information that publicly available at the time, and he made the determination. He's giving his opinion. It was a letter he wrote to the IG of his analysis of what happened based off of the funding request being denied. And
that's what it was. It was him writing a letter to the IG's internal investigator, right? Or investigator general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he basically like. This, and I don't know what his rank and stuff was, but it was a Marine Corps Major, Jeff Murphy. Okay, so Major Murphy, basically he wrote a letter to the investigator general saying, hey, this I observed these things happening. I would like you to investigate it. And what Veritas was able to get their hands on was that letter requesting the investigation. That on its own is not proof of anything. All that is just some soldier thought something happened and wanted somebody else to take a look at it. It's interesting that happened, and I'm not calling Major Murphy a liar. It's just that I know that Veritas story that broke last week, that got a lot of traction with a lot of people that I really don't think I don't think that the content that they had really held up with the level of fervor people had for, oh my God, did you see what Veritas released last week? And I just didn't see it as having the burden of proof, the weight of evidence that I think they wanted it to have. However, this additional release or leak or whatever you want to call it from the House Oversight Committee showing the actual emails of Fauci talking about these things, that has a much higher burden of evidence, I would say even proof, than what the Veritas story had.
Oh yeah, if this letter from this major was the only thing we had on Fauci, it wouldn't be worth reporting on because it would be just one man's opinion. Yeah, he might be an expert in that particular field, right? He might be an expert at funding requests for DARPA, right? But that wouldn't be a substantive claim with evidence for us to say Fauci did something wrong. However, it is worth mentioning, since we're already on a story talking about a substantive evidence release about his misconduct, mentioning that there was also, back in August of 2021, a report that was filed independently by this major who was concerned about what had happened.
Yeah, I think it adds to, as James Comey might say, the mosaic of evidence. I think that it definitely adds to that, but the content that Veritas had was not in itself evidence, but this new evidence from the House Oversight Committee certainly is.
Absolutely. So I think we just bounced around through what we're about to read. So
sounds great.
Let's go. We're good. Let's move on to the next story.
All right, the next story. It's the economy, or no, the economy. It's stupid. All right, so this is kind of just a rapid fire kind of highlights of the things that came out, because we basically, like, every 2 or 3 weeks here we have a segment. Oh, thank you for the lemon, Voracious Blackston. He's also very excited that you were back, which I am taking to imply that he was very unexcited to have me on my own. Anyways, every couple of weeks here we just have a segment where we talk about how the economy numbers are bad and getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where it almost doesn't even, like, I don't know, like 7% inflation in a year since last December. I don't know. It's like hard to put. Well, you can put numbers on it, but it's kind of hard to, like. You literally can put numbers on it, but it's hard to know how to, like, feel about it, or, like, you know, describe it without actually just saying, like, you know, go to the grocery store and buy some groceries and look at what your receipts were last year and then look what they are this year. But just I don't know. We can keep harping on it, but I don't think I have to go over every single time how bad it is. I think it's just self-evidently bad. 7% inflation. I mean, that's nuts. I'm sure that if you break down that number too, I know last time we looked at this when it was 6%, the breakout for the energy portion of it, because that 7% is everything. If you look at specific sectors like energy, it was like 50%. So I'm sure that's
oil. Energy was at 28% because some forms of energy were not as affected, but gasoline was insanely affected.
Yeah. So the 7% jump this was December of 21 back to December of 2020. 7% is the highest inflation rate since 1982, which, if you look at this graph we've got on the screen here, where did we end up going in 1982? It looks like we were on our trajectory for 14.5%. So, 7%, you could look at it as a glass half full, glass half empty. You know, hey man, we're already halfway through the inflation spike, or oh man, we have another half of the inflation spike to make it through. You know, it depends on if you're an optimist or an idiot.
If it makes you feel better, yeah, things may be getting insanely more expensive, but also on the flip side, there might not be food in the store at all. So that's not a good news.
You might say, oh my God, 7% inflation. I say yes, but it could be 14.5%. Think of how much higher it could be. And we'll get there. Don't worry. Let's see here. So this is also largely connected to the increase in home costs, the increase in rent prices, and the increase in used and new cars. Energy costs, as Dyer said, rose 28% in the last year. Democrats claim that inflation is a direct result of reopening the economy, which increased demand. While the supply chain is still restricted from the pandemic, but it was not the pandemic, it was the pandemic response which closed down the economy. And it wasn't really the pandemic or the response that caused Democrats to want to spend, like, what was it, $6 trillion? They just wanted to do that anyways. They were just using the pandemic as an excuse.
Yep. So while inflation rose 7% on average, wages on average only rose by 4.3%. And the areas in which most of those wages grew were not in areas like low skill labor jobs. There are some professional service jobs that made a lot of had big increases, and but it was not across the entire economy. So a lot of people got much smaller increases to their wages or none at all, and still are having their dollar be 7% less valuable.
Yeah, I've not gotten a raise this year. Well, last year. Let's see. So I will also point back to a segment that I did about 3 months ago. I think it was in late August, maybe early September. Where I read to you one of the final chapters of The Creature from Jekyll Island, which was a book discussing the terrible nature of the Federal Reserve. And in the chapter that I read to you guys, it was kind of the doomsday scenario of what the future might look like if we continued down the track of fiat money as we were. And in the nightmare scenario that I read to you in September, we're going to go with September, in the nightmare scenario, the book predicted that inflation would be 5% every year. And that was just unthinkable in the early 90s when this book was written. And I remember that at the time that I was reading that, I had looked up an article for you guys to share with what the actual state of the economy was. And I believe that we were at 5.3% inflation then. And now we're at 7% inflation. And I just think it's... Well, I think I read that chapter for you guys at the perfect time. If you're curious about what that was, I'd go look through our archive on YouTube there. It was I believe the episode was titled "The Fox from Jekyll Island," but it was a good read, and it was terrifying because at only 5% inflation per year, the story, the narrative that was painted by this doomsday scenario that was painted was pretty terrifying, and we're beating the pants off it by 2% already. So everything that was bad in it will probably get worse.
Yep. And it's not like the Democrats are learning from their mistakes. So there's no changing of the trajectory, right?
Absolutely not. Well, it's also are tending to use some of these dystopic future books as guidebooks. Yeah.
So that's what we need to do next.
Yes. Alrighty. So related to this is the economy. Like I said, it's stupid. We had some interesting revelations this week, and that would be with why is your Amazon package late? So in LA, train tracks have become blanketed in boxes, as you can see on the screen here. And the reason why is because thieves are targeting cargo container trains. Yes, we have made the great train bandit great again. They're riding around on horses and chasing them down. Interestingly enough, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, who was famously chosen due to his love of trains, had really nothing to say about this, which was, if anybody had something to say about this, you would think that the Transportation Secretary would. So we had this story from the New York Post. Let's see here. So train tracks used for freight transport in Los Angeles have begun to resemble garbage dumps Thursday as thieves have been raiding cargo containers and leaving shipping packages in their wake. Yeah, isn't that crazy? So they're robbing the trains, and then right there on the tracks, they're opening the boxes, taking out the goodies, and then leaving the boxes behind.
It's actually really efficient if you think about it. Like, why let the products get to the stores? Why let them get to someone's doorstep? Just rob them at the source.
Exactly. They are stealing packages right out of the mouths of hungry bread shoppers or bread stealers trying to steal $949 worth of stuff out of a Walgreens. And now there's nothing to steal because the packages never made it there. Or people trying to steal the Christmas gift that Aunt Nana gave you and she shipped to you and it was on your porch and then somebody came by and stole it. Well, now they can't do it because somebody already stole it before it even got to your porch. It's terrible. This kind of economy, man.
I feel like I keep making jokes, but California's just a hellhole, and you guys need to get out.
Yeah, it is. The screwy scene at a section of Union Pacific tracks was captured by CBS LA, which also filmed an apparent theft darting. Sorry, they also filmed an apparent thief darting from the area while carrying packages. The sea of scraped cardboard containers, discarded items from Amazon, REI, and other popular retailers was the outlet reported. Union Pacific acknowledges the cargo theft in a statement to news stations and said they have taken steps to crack down on crimes.
But they can't arrest them because unless the thing they're stealing is more than $900 and some odd, right?
I would assume so. The LAPD doesn't respond to train thefts. Why?
Or any thefts. Or any crimes.
Sources told CSBLA, unless the freight company specifically requests help. The tracks were littered with refuse this week, despite being cleared by Union Pacific workers a month ago, the report said. So, what? And if you're in LA and you just I don't know, while you're robbing somebody, you duct tape their mouth shut, then they can't call the cops, is that okay? It's well, the cops can only intervene if the person wants it, so,
Well, what we've learned from the Democrats who control California is that if you enforce laws and protect people, if you stop crimes, you're a racist because obviously in their mind only black people commit crimes.
Oh my God! I mean, look at this picture. There's a bunch more pictures here, but I mean, wow! I mean, it's just seas of boxes.
Jeez, the government has one job: protect the people, right?
Yeah. Packages and debris litter train tracks in Los Angeles on Friday. Oh, no.
God, is that a baby? Oh, never mind.
Well, they left the white ones, so. Let's see here. These rail crimes pose a serious safety threat to public, of course. Our employees and local law enforcement officers, Union Pacific said in a statement to the outlet. Quote, we have increased the number of Union Pacific special agents on patrol. Wait, they're special agents for trains?
Special train agent, yes.
Ooh, wow. And we have utilized and explored additional technologies to help us combat this criminal activity. This comes as California...
Wait. How many of these guys who are robbing the trains are actually train agents embedded with the criminals?
I don't know, man. What kind of special technology? Are we putting I don't know, blades on the side of the trains or something? So when they go through, they I don't know.
Yeah, they should definitely put greased razor blades on the side of trains.
Why would you grease a razor blade?
So if you try climbing the train, you slip off of it and into the razor blades. Obviously, come on.
You put way too much thought into that. Let's see here. I mean, geez, it's just mountains and mountains of stuff. Goodness. What is this? Is this a dryer or something? What is that?
Yes, it is. So, I had my parents sent me 3 packages for Christmas for my family and I, and I never received them.
I think it's that one right there.
Actually, what really happened was they mailed them to a war zone because they used a previous address I had.
Oh, really?
So my mom sent me kept asking me if the packages arrived. And I kept going to the base post office and kept saying, nope, they haven't arrived yet. And then
so some other poor soldier is getting a treat for your mom then.
Yep, she sent cookies and a bunch of other stuff. So I
assume that your room, wherever you were, probably still there probably is somebody there.
It doesn't go by room; it goes by unit. So basically, when you're deployed, you send packages to a unit, and then your name is in it, and they then your leadership finds you. So what happened was the unit mail monitor picked up the mail for everybody, including these boxes, brought it to the unit, and they couldn't. Of course, they didn't know who I was because it was such a long time ago. So they I guess these are care packages.
Dyer really left an impression.
No, dude, it's different people every so many months. They're not gonna know who I am. So they thought it was a care package. Also, my mom also sent them.
Dyer, that's why you use a pocket knife to etch that Dyer was here on the rafters.
I did leave stickers.
That's the gayest thing I've ever heard.
From you, that's saying something. You know the Dire Wolf sticker?
You use Dire Wolf sticker. Jesus Christ. But yeah, the story broke this week. I thought it was pretty interesting. A lot of other outlets picked this up. Somebody close to me suggested that we do this story, so I did. Yeah, where is Pete Buttigieg at? Where is Jeff Bezos at? I mean, a lot of these.
Leave.
What's that?
He's still on baby leave right now.
Where is where's a lot of people at? I mean, this is this is a pretty big deal. And actually, Union Pacific, not included in this New York Post story, Union Pacific said that they are reducing service in this area, and they're considering not running trains in this area at all. I mean, geez, so the Democrats wanted high-speed rails, and now they're going to get no rails.
Well, shoot, I mean, all this trash on the rails, it only takes one particularly hard metal thing to derail the train.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, so one of the reasons why this is able to happen at all is because this is an area where trains will typically slow down or wait so that they can time the main line correctly. Like, they need to be spaced out correctly. So this is a good area where they can kind of slow down and make sure the schedule on the main track is spaced out so they're not crashing in with other trains. And now they're having to go even slower through here because of the debris, which is further creating the problem that they're an easy target for people to come by and steal stuff.
Yep. There's another link there for you.
Is there?
Yeah.
What's the other link?
It's that thing you asked me to post a picture of, which is currently on the slides.
Oh, yeah. So there was an interesting stat that came out this week. So as we just went over, the economy kind of sucks, except for unless you're in Congress. So this is a list that came out this week of professional, members of Congress whose portfolios beat the SPY, which I'm not positive what the SPY is. I know it's one of the index funds, and an index fund is supposed to pretty much track with how the economy is doing. It's meant to be kind of go, if the S&P goes up, it'll go up. If the S&P goes down, it goes down, that kind of a thing. And so kind of the SPY is like your average, how is the economy doing? So if you're doing good with your portfolio, you're beating it. If you're doing bad with your portfolio, you're not beating it. And so what we have here is a list of members of Congress who are able to beat that somehow. A lot of Republicans up here. Somehow Dan Crenshaw. So Nancy Pelosi gets a lot of flack because what are your dogs doing, Dyer? Somehow Nancy.
She wants me to pet her really badly.
Well, pet her. What's wrong with you? Let's get a 1 in chat if you want Dyer to pet his dog.
I will pet her once for every 1 in chat.
There we go. All right, let's get 1s in chat for pets for Willow. Alrighty, so so Nancy Pelosi often gets a lot of flack because was 2 weeks ago she was asked, is it appropriate for members of Congress to be trading stocks? Isn't that insider trading? And Nancy all of a sudden became an ANCAP and was like, this is a free market capitalist economy. Members of Congress should be allowed to participate in that. Michael Malice blushed.
I disagree. I very much disagree. I don't think you have a right to benefit off of economic decisions that you will affect.
Yeah. Right? And so Nancy's been highly criticized by that because somehow her portfolio always beats out everyone else. Actually, there was, interestingly enough, there was a Twitter and a Reddit that was tracking Nancy Pelosi's portfolio picks, and people were making their stock picks based off of what Nancy's portfolio was because all of that has to be public because they're public officials. And people were doing very well doing their stock picks off of what Nancy was picking, and then Twitter deleted the account that was tracking Nancy's portfolio, which is pretty wild. But I find it interesting on this list here. Actually, Dan Crenshaw is beating out Nancy Pelosi. What do you think about Dan Crenshaw, Dyer? I know he kind of popped on the scene hot and heavy about 2 years ago. It's supposed to be this big military guy, gruff Texan, and he seems to have some issues. He's had some recurring issues with the Second Amendment. He's had some recurring issues with economic stuff here. He's got some I forget what foundation he was recently found to have ties with, but some kind of globalist organization. And then now we see, he's up there with the best of them on his portfolio picks there. What do we think about Dan Crenshaw here?
So I like some of the things Dan Crenshaw has said, and I think you guys probably can figure out what those things he said I would have liked just by going through listening to him. But he's also said some things that showed that he had a lack of principle behind his decisions. And I also am always skeptical of a Republican who is supported by the establishment and is being given a microphone by the Republicans leadership, because I don't trust them. I think that he doesn't have the air of someone who made it on his own and is independent from the party.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do a deeper investigation of Dan here coming up, because he appears to kind of continuously have these issues where it's an authenticity issue, and a lot of questions about his past kind of keep coming up every now and then. And maybe he deserves kind of a larger segment in the next few months here.
I would vote for him over Nancy Pelosi for sure, and over probably a lot of people. But it doesn't mean that we stop scrutinizing Republicans just because they're our side, because they're not our side. I'm my side, and a lot of times it coincides with the Republicans. But plenty of times in the past, Republicans have not been on my side.
Voracious says that he seems Bush-esque, which I would agree with.
Yeah.
Let's see here. All right, so this was interesting. So just, if you guys are having a tough time with the economy, don't worry. Our elected officials are not having a tough time. They are just fine. Nancy's $20,000 refrigerator is still packed with ice cream. So, if it was keeping you up at night, wondering whether or not Nancy was going to have her next mint chocolate chip or Rocky Road, fear not, because her stock picks are doing very, very well.
Fox, think about how crazy this is. Congress's job, particularly Congress, is the purse strings. They are directly assigning government money, our taxpayer money, to give to companies. And I'm not saying, they say, we're funding the government. No, a lot of funding the government is actually sending money directly to different companies that are government subsidized. And then, so they have all this money they're giving out, and they know who's going to benefit. So they know who to invest in, because every time they pass a new bill that gives money to a certain company, they're
some kind of communist?
They're determining the list of people that they know if they invest in them before that bill goes through, that they're going to have a windfall. They determine
exactly. It's capitalism, Dyer.
It's not capitalism,
man, guys. Dyer's some kind of communist over here. He doesn't believe in crony capitalism.
She's describing this as the free market, but no, when the government is picking winners and losers and giving billions of dollars to industry, that's not free market. That's not even capitalism.
I agree. Alrighty, well, that was fun. We will surely not be the last segment on why the economy is just falling into a pit. But that was this week's segment on why the economy is falling into a pit.
See you next week.
Great. All right. Actually, not see you next week, because we have more stories.
I meant for that topic.
Come on, Dyer. All right. Our next story is there going to be a Biden-Harris ticket in 2024?
I love this slide. It's a great slide.
I almost deleted this slide without telling you about it. While it's tempting to look forward to the midterms, at the rate things seem to be going, 10 months is going to be an awfully long time to wait. And if you felt that Biden's first 12 months was a little grueling, you're not alone.
In a recent Quinnipiac, wow, I did it anyways. Quinnipiac.
All right, we're gonna take a pause here. So some show notes. Dyer tried to say the word Quinnipiac like 1,000 times before the stream started, and he's like, "Wait, how do you pronounce it?" And I was like, "Dyer, it doesn't matter, because no matter how many times you say it before the show, you are still gonna mispronounce it when we get to it in the show." And Fox was right.
Yeah, okay. So at a recent Quinnipiac poll, Biden's approval has dipped to 35%. This means that 35 out of every 100 Americans are clinically insane. We're talking about batshit crazy, COVID infected, batshit crazy. Fauci putting puppies through a wood chipper level of crazy. It's Kamala Joker laugh level of unhinged. This approval rating follows a several-month-long trend of declining approval. The only people who are sane are the ones who understand that he is not fit to do his job. Anyone who approves of Biden's job, left or right, has a screw loose. Seemingly related to all of our previous stories of rising inflation, at some point we may expect inflation to overtake Biden's approval rating within the next 18 months.
Yeah, won't that be crazy? Biden's approval rating will be lower than inflation. Now, the question is, will inflation jump up to meet Biden's approval rating, or will Biden's approval rating drop to meet inflation?
Or maybe they'll meet in the middle. We'll find out. Maybe they'll meet at 14.
That segment is a joke. No one except for me is predicting that that's going to happen, but it is a fully serious prediction that I am making. That in the next 18 months, Biden's approval rating will flip under inflation, which is terrifying.
I think it could happen.
We will find out in the next 18 months.
I believe in Biden. I think he can do it.
Biden may have been elected with a record number of votes, but let's not forget that he was not the only one on the ticket. Let's check in with his better half, who had a rather remarkable interview this week.
As needed.
At what point does the administration say, you know what, this strategy isn't working? We're going to change strategies. 6 former administration officials last week wrote that open letter urging the administration to change course, to change strategy. Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
Okay, I want to point out that she's been asked a similar question multiple times in the last month, because ever since that story came out where they're talking about the drama where the Biden administration is planning on getting rid of her, and also the
We're not
Democrats
at that
are talking.
segment yet.
Okay, well, regardless, since this drama started brewing in the public eye about them maybe not running, the media has continually asked her versions of this question, and the funny thing is she's getting worse at answering it.
I don't know, Dyer. I mean, it's time for us to be doing what we have been doing, and that time is every day. I mean, can you think of any wiser phrasing? I mean, come on, man. It's like I don't know. It's wise. It's wisdom incarnate. It defies language for describing how wise her words are.
I'm pretty sure that one of the first times she was asked this question, she responded that the person asking was doing something racist or sexist by asking the question, which, yes, is insane, but at least it was a coherent thought. This is not that.
I mean, this isn't even a fortune cookie level of like incoherence. So
she's digressing.
Yeah, after clearly just knocking that question absolutely out of the park, she was asked about the voter rights bill that ended up failing that we just talked about, and this was her response.
It was an American issue.
But Madam Vice President, how are you going to get it done?
Well, when we have the discussion about who's responsible, I will not absolve the 50 Republicans in the United States Senate from responsibility for upholding one of the most basic and important tenets of our democracy, which is free and fair elections and access to the ballot for all eligible voters.
What about Senator Manchin? What about Senator Sinema?
I don't think anyone should be absolved from the responsibility of preserving and protecting our democracy, especially when they took an oath to protect and defend our Constitution.
Why has the administration not been able to get Senate Democrats on board?
We are not giving up.
No, but the question was why has it taken this long?
But you're acting as though it's over.
Well, I mean,
It's not over.
So it's going to happen by Monday.
I'm saying it's not over, and we don't give up. We don't give up, and we
It's over.
It's over.
will not give up.
Never.
And we won't give up.
Freedom. It looks like her mouth is getting a bit dry there. Did you notice that?
My favorite part of that exchange was, what are you going to do to get this done? And what he was referring to was the voter rights bill that failed. And so what are you going to do to get this done? And then she goes into, well, when we talk about whose fault this is, we are not going to absolve Republicans. Wait. That's not an answer as to what are you going to do to get this done. That's you already conceding that it failed by talking about who are you going to finger point at.
And then she's saying he's acting like it's already over. No, your statement is assigning blame and then giving up on it.
I mean, imagine like getting like a tasker at work, Dyer, and like your superior gives you like, hey, like here's a project that I need you to work on, and your first response is, well, when I don't do this and I have to point fingers at somebody, Sergeant Jake's gonna be first on the list.
Exactly, right? That's how I do all the things.
You have to pre-plan who you're going to finger point at.
The first thing you do when you're given a mission is to assign who will be at fault when it fails.
Yes.
I learned this from my leadership.
Yes, as the Mark Milley way is the first step is figure out whose fault it is and make sure it's not you.
And then you're done.
And that's it. There is no step 2.
It's a very efficient way of dealing with the military.
So this was obviously another stellar knocking it out of the park.
Fantastic, good job.
It's so inspiring, and I just want to say to the people who say Kamala Harris was only hired because of the color of her skin or because of the genitalia she has, you were clearly correct. But that is just because...
That's not fair, Fox. I heard that she had some great assets. She could suck a mean dick.
Dyer went there. Dyer went there. But just because you guys are right that she was only hired because of her skin color, doesn't mean that she's not going to go for that diversity hire spot once more in 2024. Let's listen.
Are we going to see the same Democratic ticket in 2024?
I'm sorry, we are thinking about today. I mean, honestly, I know why you're asking the question, because this is part of the punditry and the gossip around places like Washington, D.C. Let me just tell you something. We're focused on the things in front of us. We're focused on what we need to do to address issues like affordable child care, what we need to do to ensure...
So there have been no conversations about 2024?
The American people sent...
I want to rewind it a little bit, but I love when she gets a question that she can't answer and she like physically chokes.
One second. I think it's completely reasonable when someone's utterly failing at their job to discuss about, whether they'll be employed next year. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing to discuss.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Unemployed. But again, she does have kind of a theme here. She's not looking out to the future because, as you know, it's the time to be doing what we've been doing, and that time is every day. I want to replay that her just actually choking again.
Just here to address issues like affordable child care, what we need to do to ensure...
So there have been no conversations about 2024?
The American people sent us here to do a job. And right now there's a lot of work to be done, and that's my focus.
It is...
physically choke on an interview. She literally physically choked on the interview.
I don't know, maybe it does have to do with what you said about some of her previous talents or methods of getting advancements. Just any time she's faced with a challenge, she
sensed the threat and it reflexively swallowed.
Yeah, her throat just goes into overtime. That's just Kamala Harris for you. Any adversity, her default reaction. Some people like freeze, some people go hide in a corner, some people cry. Kamala Harris starts guaddle stopping her throat like a champ.
Oh my God! This is a defense mechanism she learned. This interview is going badly. My throat's getting dry. My mouth.
All right. Well, that was the highest brow segment we have. And for our, is this the second or the
all
third?
In the script, right?
Yeah, this is the third story D, because Dyer and I are terrible at naming the stories. So segment D3, officially, there has been an insurrection. For a long time there no insurrection actually happened, but it's official. What happened, Dyer?
Okay, so far this year, with the ongoing Capitol Hill hearings into the Jan 6th, it has been regularly thrown in the Democrats' faces that none of the so-called insurrectionists have been arrested actually having been charged with insurrection, which by itself is not a thing you can be charged with. But anything that would be akin to insurrection. In contrast, the evidence shows that the vast majority of people who were at the Capitol that day were peaceful and were invited in some cases, by the Capitol Police. Everyone, even the extremely few that were violent, were unarmed, counter to what they said, that there was armed protesters. And 90% of those who did conduct or incite acts of violence were actually working for the FBI. So far from the Antifa riots that the Democrats would regularly encourage, this was not a terrorist event. Definitely not an insurrection. Because of this embarrassing reality, and is not in dispute, the lack of violence that day, the lack of people actually harmed or killed by protesters at the event is undeniable. There's lots and lots of video of it. And because of this embarrassing reality, the Democrats have pressured the FBI to make their lie become true. This week, the FBI have arrested 12 members of the Oath Keepers, the leader and 11 members. This is a militia group made up of mostly ex-military and police officers who regularly provide security and emergency medical services and support to protect protesters around the country. They were arrested and charged with seditious conspiracy.
It took a full year to figure out which ones were and were not associated with the FBI.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Because they couldn't just dragnet all of them because it'd be, half FBI guys.
Even when they're trying not to, they accidentally did get some of the FBI guys on their watch list for a while before they were taken off.
Yeah, I mean, what we've really learned here is that if you are in some kind of conservative group of any kind, chances are that at least half of your members have some kind of association with the military and are employees of the federal government.
Chances are, one of us is an FBI plant.
Yeah, and I'm not. I don't work for the federal government. Dyer, do you? Oh my God, it's you! Oh God,
you can't prove anything.
I can't,
but please do speak straight into the microphone.
Okay. Let's see. So none of the Oath Keepers that were arrested actually engaged in violence. None of them were armed at the event, and none incited violence. In fact, we still have no charges at all for gun possession in D.C. There's not been any charges for gun possession from any of the rioters, protesters, and supposed insurrectionists. The indictment says that Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers, and the other 11 Oath Keepers that were also indicted, were prepared and were ready to bring weapons and equipment to contribute to the insurrection. The indictment also stated that the Oath Keepers provided or offered paramilitary training, first being prepared for unrest and doing paramilitary training. First of all, being prepared for unrest and doing paramilitary training is what militia groups do. What was the definition of paramilitary? Wasn't it just like a unorganized military, which is like the definition of a militia?
It's parallel to the military, not in the military, but doing military things. So they are organized and equipped to protect.
Couldn't it be said that the military does like militia things? Because you guys are, you're not precisely constitutional, right? Like the Constitution does not provide for a infinitely standing army. It doesn't necessarily preclude it, but it was never. Go ahead.
The CIA is paramilitary. The FBI could be defined as paramilitary as they have their own little commando units.
Yeah, because all the agencies have SWAT teams that are essentially undistinguishable from a military SWAT group, like some kind of infiltration group.
The implication here is the word paramilitary is a negative thing.
It just is a thing.
if they want to say that paramilitary, a force that has tactics and equipment like the military, but is not the military, if they're trying to say that's a bad thing, then they would be implicating themselves.
Dyer, are you suggesting that a word I have a low familiarity with and sounds kind of scary, that isn't a bad thing?
Yes.
Oh, well, my mistake then.
So a militia, by definition, is paramilitary, and they are.
Some might suggest that our military is paramilitary, given their record.
Ooh, ouch, that stings pretty bad, actually.
Yeah, actually, yeah, oof, rough.
So, and then a militia group. I mean, people might feel like this indictment is scary if they don't know what a militia group is, but yes, of course they were prepared and had equipment for dealing with a protest or a attempted overthrow of the government or something along those lines, because that's what they're meant to stand guard for, is to protect against those kinds of things. And that's what they do. They have like military equipment and weapons, and they go to protest and protect the protesters. So yes, at all times they were ready, but did they bring them to the Capitol? No, they didn't bring any of the body armor, any of the equipment, any of the weapons. They did not do any of that. So them being prepared is not a crime. And then
also let's also point out that the lesser known protection of the Second Amendment is that it also provides for the militia, like being necessary for the militia. Like the Second Amendment, often cited as gun rights, is also technically militia rights, because it implies the militia's existence.
Yes. So the reason for the charter for any militia is to protect against any civilian who's being civilian criminals, but also to protect against government overreach as well. It is to protect the rights of the people. It is the people defending the people. So that is baked into the charter of a militia in the first place. Really, in the end, the FBI don't think that militias have a right to exist, but they have a legitimate reason. Now, they said they offered paramilitary training. That might sound scary to you, but that's what a militia meeting is them getting together and practicing tactics, training, and equipment, so that if they ever were in a conflict, they'd actually be competent. So it's not like they were preparing to overthrow the U.S. government. They're always preparing to defend the country.
So some people might be able to argue, though, if they're paramilitary, parallel to the military, that it's possible their preparations for conflict are in fact preparations to lose that conflict.
I guess. So
I mean, if they're paramilitary, if they're parallel to the current military, I mean, you know, the wins and losses there are not super great. Sorry.
Yes. So anyways, the militia is organized and equipped to protect. Based on how the FBI has very recently and very often defined normal, reasonable behavior as treasonous, should we trust them this time when they're describing this militia as basically a militia and then saying that there was malintent?
Well,
I'm not going to immediately believe them.
Well, they used a word that I'm not familiar with, which sounds kind of scary. So I think we should let them do whatever they want just to be safe.
Yes, take my freedoms. I'm scared.
I'm ignorant and I don't know how to use a dictionary. Please take my rights.
I don't even know where to find a dictionary these days.
Exactly.
So how much of these insurrection plans were actually provided by FBI agents and were passively agreed to by members? But
I would
they
say
didn't plan on doing
all
anything.
of them.
Because we know that one of the guys we're going to be talking to in a moment actually was one of the guys who was FBI plant, was a president of a Oath Keepers chapter in Arizona. So he was one of many of the FBI plants inside the organization, and we already know that the FBI will do all of the planning, all the preparation, and then just try to convince someone to join their operation. An operation that did not happen, by the way. So are they going to use evidence from those FBI agents planted inside the organization of them saying there's plans as evidence against the members who didn't actually follow said plan?
I would say yes, they will be. And as evidence to kind of back up what you said, we had some, I don't know if it was breaking or just kind of like newly resurfaced evidence from the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping event that happened a few years ago, which was famously mostly consisting like 2-to-1 FBI agents to civilians. And it turns out that the very small number of civilians, the one that they picked out to be kind of the kingpin of the organization, even though it's known that the FBI informants were the ones that did all of the major planning in that case. They did all of the materials acquisition, all of the resource gathering. They did a lot of the intel gathering for all that. The fall guy that they picked for that, apparently it has come out that his nickname amongst his friends prior to this incident was Captain Autism, because he had severe autism. Now, that's not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but do we really think that somebody that was so autistic that they were called Captain Autism by their friends, that they were planning all on their lonesome? They were the kingpin of a kidnapping plot that was going to be effective? Or do we think that maybe the FBI picked out that guy because they knew that someone like him might be a little more trusting or amicable to their ideas, and that they could pin all kinds of stuff on him, not because they particularly hated him, but because they needed a narrative that Trump supporters were trying to kill and kidnap Democrat operatives.
Remember that giant internet game of capture the flag where they drove they totally drove that guy crazy?
Oh yeah, Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean, maybe when they're motivated, they could do some crazy things. But...
Yes, the FBI told them that there was a flag which needed capturing, and there was all over it.
Exactly. Anyway, so I'm going to skip down to the part about Ray Epps. It's funny you should mention that, because Ray Epps was the man that there's videos of him on the 5th and the 6th, where he on the 5th was going to a bunch of different groups within a Trump rally and telling them that they needed to go to the Capitol. We need to go into the Capitol. We need to do whatever it takes to break into the Capitol tomorrow. And he was trying to get people to follow his cause. And then on the 6th, he's seen doing the same encouragement, though he was called on the 5th. Republicans started calling, or Trump supporters started calling him a Fed, because he was obviously trying to coax them into committing crimes. And on the day of the 6th, one of his co-conspirators, also not charged for their crimes, broke into the Capitol right after he instructed them to do so, or appeared to do so. And it was giving them instructions about how to do it. So this guy, Ray Epps, is seen obviously inciting violence, encouraging and directing it, but he was not arrested. He was initially on the FBI's most wanted listing related to Jan 6, but he was quickly removed when they realized that they put their own agent on their list. He was the guy I was referring to earlier, who was the president of the Arizona chapter of the Oath Keepers. So he was one of the informants on the Oath Keepers on the inside at a high rank. He was not charged. The FBI is known to place agents into militia groups to monitor them. This is what Ray Epps was. Now, I know this.
Yeah. Now we, for a while on this show, and Dyer most especially, for definitely like years now, have said it's not the best idea to be joining up with these groups, and it's not the best idea to be going out with them at protests. We said that during the summer of unrest, the summer of love, where BLM and Antifa were burning down the cities for 150 days straight, and there was counter protests by various groups like Patriot Prayer and such like that. We had said that it wasn't the best idea to go out and associate with those groups, because you're putting a target on yourself for either action by Antifa, or in this case, you might be accidentally associating yourself with some kind of FBI informant. And just for the mere crime of saying hi to them or wearing a t-shirt, you could get wrapped up in a terrorism charge. Now, is that the best use of your First Amendment? Now, that's something for you to decide. But if you are pulled out of the fight and put in jail for a stupid reason, when you could be furthering yourself and your family, and not being put in jail for sending a text message to somebody. Is it right that you should have to limit your use of the First Amendment like that? Absolutely not. But is it strategic? And that's for you to decide. But it would appear that Dyer was correct when he said that years ago. And rolling the clock forward a little bit, and it looks like it's not the best idea to maybe be associating with some of these branded militia cells.
So another thing that came out with that the Gretchen Whitmer false flag was that, I don't know if you know this, I think I mentioned it to you earlier, that the lead FBI agent, the one in charge of the office in Michigan, the group of FBI that did the operation to trick 4 members of a militia group, the 3 percenters, to attempt a kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer. And also, if you remember, the plan was to storm the state capitol. The FBI led that operation, and the guy who led it was Stephen D'Antonio. And that FBI agent was promoted after that FBI op, that false flag op. He was promoted to the DC FBI office and is currently the one leading the Jan 1 investigation.
That's crazy. So you're saying the guy who is known to have organized an FBI false flag against Trump supporters is now investigating Trump supporters in an event that was widely criticized as appearing to be a false flag incident.
Yeah. Strange.
That's crazy. That's just so weird.
Very weird.
Is that it?
Yeah. The next thing is just talking about the definition of the crime that they're being charged with.
Oh, go for it.
Oh, it's your spot. Okay. So the legal definition.
Oh, I thought you had said we skipped over all that.
I had to skip ahead to cover that part.
Oh, okay. We're just doing it out of order. We weren't skipping it. Okay. All right. So the legal definition of seditious conspiracy. So that's what they were charged with. So a seditious conspiracy charge requires only that the conspirators made a plot against the United States and began to implement it, regardless of how far it was carried out, which I would say that making a plot would be beginning to implement it, right? I mean, like, the first step of a plan is to make a plan, right? So it is very possible that the Oath Keepers had a plan to respond to an attempt to overthrow our government or steal an election. Those plans, taken out of context, willfully misunderstood, could sound like plans to overthrow the federal government. It is always possible that they had real, unrelated plans to overthrow the government, but we have seen no signs or evidence that it came from the Oath Keepers. Regardless, they clearly had no plan for January 6th, and there's a lot of evidence that the plans that they did have were to, peacefully assemble and not have guns and not take over anything and not enter the building.
I know they have definitively know they had no plan to overthrow the government on Jan 6 because they did not bring weapons, not even like with them. They didn't leave them in their cars. They left them in a different state. They didn't bring armor. They did not bring more than a total of 12 people because that were within their own group. And they did not organize other members of the crowd to do jack shit. So if they had a plan to overthrow the government, it was a pretty ineffective plan. Or you might even call non-existent. So it's possible, though, that they have lots of text messages, that these FBI agents have been in their organization communicating with them and taking down their statements and holding on to them, ready to take them out of context to use them to arrest them for this crime, which is very, very, very loosely a very loose definition. You could say basically anyone who says that they would do something if they thought that the election was stolen, that person plans to do something, and that's the first step in a conspiracy to overthrow the government, and that they could charge them with this very loose definition of a crime. So they very likely will have some text messages that they could have used anytime. but they're going to choose to use them in relation to Jan 6, even though they themselves have no relation to Jan 6.
And as far as text messages go, we already know that the Jan 6 committee has no problem with fabricating text messages. As came out last month, several of the text messages from various Congress people to members of the media and back and forth were released under the January 6th quote-unquote committee investigation. And it was found that Adam Schiff had just wholesale fabricated several of the text messages attributed to, I believe, Matt Gaetz. I could be wrong on that, but it was one of the Republican congressmen. And the text messages he showed were just not the real text messages. He just wrote them up and said, well, I meant that, they looked like this, or I was paraphrasing it. It's like, no. Evidence is evidence. You can't just paraphrase it and enter it as evidence.
Yeah, and I want to point out again that if you remember how Biden's phone call with Ukraine and the whole Russian investigation, how very normal statements were misconstrued, misquoted, and just lied about by the FBI to accuse someone of a crime and to put people in jail. They've already shown that that's what they'll do even when the world is watching. And these court cases where these guys are going to be put in jail will not have a national audience. So what would stop them from lying? What would stop them from having the same thing that they tried to do to Rittenhouse, where they just completely fabricate evidence? That's going to happen. That's what they always do.
So, knowing that, again, it's not to say that you shouldn't exercise your
just know the risks.
Rights. Yeah, just be strategic and understand the risks that, it's not that it's right that they will, put you in jail for years as a political prisoner for using your First Amendment right, but just be strategic. Is that the hill that you want to die on? Figuratively or literally,
or maybe literally,
or do you think that maybe your skills and effort might be better placed later in the timeline? I certainly think mine would be better suited for later in the timeline, and I don't think it'd be worthwhile for me to be arrested and placed in jail now. Maybe you do. I don't know. That's for you to decide. But I'm just saying you got to be strategic about it. Is it right that you have to be strategic about it? No, we've got enumerated rights. Well, no. We have very specifically protected rights, and then all of the things that are not listed are still our rights, unless specifically said that they are not in the Constitution. So it's not correct that we have to be quote unquote careful in how we are using our rights, but that is the reality of the situation, and we are realists here on Dire Wolf Media, not necessarily idealists.
Yep.
All right. Anything else?
No, that was our last story, actually.
Yeah. You said before the show started, we got our stream taken down last time.
Yeah. So
what was the consequences of that? So that was on DLive too.
Yeah. So we got a message on DLive. It was in our chat saying
that was weird
that our live stream had violated the guidelines and had been taken down. The funny thing was, it was taken down after our show was over. So cool, I guess. No one got to see the show who were there for the live show. There was no other consequences, so it's possible DLive has an algorithm that's not functioning right.
So I also have noticed something about Windows 11. They made the taskbar slightly taller, and so now the capture that I had set up to perfectly capture the web page now is pulling in a small strip of the taskbar at the bottom of the screen, and now I'm going to have to edit Streamlabs so that I can fix that, which sucks.
Thank you, computer, for updating.
Yes, thank you. I've been pushing that update off for like a month at this point, and it finally got me.
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing, actually.
All right. Well,
it never comes at a good time.
Well, this was a great show. Had fun. Did you have fun?
thank you for inviting me on the show, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
You're a up and comer, and I want to make sure I'm assisting you and showing you the ropes, and maybe someday I'll teach you enough that you can do a show all on your own.
That's very honorable of you, man.
Yeah, it's good to have a mentor like me.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching the show today. We enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you're enjoying your 7% inflation. And we will see you next Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Yep.
Special show next week.
Awesome. Dire Wolf out.
All right. Trees signing.